Welcome. In this video, I'm going to look over 2-to-1 counterpoint responses and showing where they could be improved. Some follow all the rules but could be improved, and a few are questionable in terms of species counterpoint exercises, where the student would want to follow the guidelines in order to create patterns of thought that will help when running into a real-life situation. So in a real-life situation, you're probably going to go outside of and break some of these rules here and there, but in these exercises, you want to follow all of the rules. So when you're writing your own counterpoint, you're going to know the best options for the strongest voice leading independence. Okay, so enough talking, let's get into it. So there might be some more things than I touch on in these that are wrong with it. There might be some good things about them that I don't really talk about, but the main thing I'm going to talk about are the main things that stick out to me. So this first response is for Dorian below. So the counterpoint is written below. So when you're writing below, you're looking for that low point, but at the same time, you might also create and you might also want to create a high point. And you can see there is a low point and it is a consonant leap away from the tonic. And then if we look for a high point, we can see that yes, the highest point is here, the note E, and in fact there is a leap up to it, but there's no recovery from this high point. In fact, it actually leaps down a fifth from the high point. The high point also occurs on an upbeat, but then if we look at the entire thing as a whole, we only see an acute amount of stepwise motion. So if we look from the beginning, okay, we can see some stepwise motion here, we can see some more stepwise motion as it prolongs, and then we lose that. What happened? There's no more stepwise motion really at all. This next example is Dorian above. This one totally follows all the rules. It also has a good amount of stepwise motion. And as you can see, there is a high point, the note A, and it is a consonant leap away from the tonic D. There's two definite things that could be strengthened here and they go hand to hand. First, there isn't really a low point at all. In fact, the whole counterpoint never goes below the range of the very first A that it starts on. And you can also see from the beginning it establishes the range of about a fourth, and then from there it basically follows that range of the fourth throughout the entire thing. There are only three other notes in the counterpoint that go above this note D, and that is, you can see the A, F, and E. Other than that, the very last note where it goes up to the octave. So not a whole lot going on in the register there. Okay, so this next one also follows all the rules. I think the first thing that sticks out is there is some stepwise motion in here, but there's a good amount of stepwise motion all in one place, and then there's also a lot of leaps all in one place. So it's not really balanced in between having some leaps and some stepwise motion and some more leaps and some more stepwise motion. So it would probably be a lot better if there was a good amount of stepwise motion and some leaps within that, like a balance of both. Also, right in the beginning, we see a lot of parallel thirds in a row, so we're never told parallel thirds are a bad thing, but if you're going to do a lot of parallel intervals in a row, it's not going to really create any voice independence because you're just going to be creating the same intervals. So you can see the thirds, there's a third that's created on this upbeat here, and then it goes in parallel motion to this downbeat, and then there's also this downbeat goes in parallel motion to this other downbeat to another third, and then this third goes in parallel motion to the next downbeat on another third. Oh, and I also meant to talk about this, I didn't really write it down, but as you can see, it leaps up a fourth to the high point, and then it doesn't really resolve down on the upbeat. On the downbeat, you can see it does go down a third, but on the upbeat, it's going down a fifth. So a very easy fix for this could just be putting this up to where it's a ninth, to where it functions as a dissonant passing tone between this A and this F. So that was an easy fix, but not always are you going to have an easy fix like that. A lot of times you're going to want to fix something, and then you're going to have to fix everything around it, and then you might end up having to almost redo the entire thing or just redo it. Okay, so this next one, we see the big no that everyone talks about, and that's we see the parallel fifths. So you can see the C on the upbeat creates a fifth between G, and then that moves in parallel motion to the F and C, creating another fifth. So we have parallel fifths. Definitely one of the biggest things that people talk about that ruins the strength in the voice leading independence. So in doing counterpoint below, you're looking for a low point. And we do see a low point, it's only a third below the actual tonic. It's also not as important to recover leaps going down, but as you can see, it's only doing a leap of a third to the low point, and then it's also not really recovered. So not having a large leap to the low point, and then also not recovering a large leap doesn't really make it the strongest sense of a low point. It doesn't really establish the low point very much, also on top of the fact that it being only a third below the tonic. So maybe in this case, shooting for a lower low point, or maybe starting the tonic on the unison in order to establish a lower low point. Whatever it is, those things would help that establish a stronger sense of a low point. We can also see in the counterpoint there is a leap up to a high point. but the high point being the note G is only the second scale degree of F, so not a consonant leap away from the tonic, and then also after the leap it's not recovered down a step in the opposite direction. This next one stays within the guidelines of using all the correct intervals and using them in the correct places for the most part, but the biggest thing is there's not very much stepwise motion at all. In fact, the entire counterpoint is mostly leaps, and some leaps are quite large in areas that they would better not be, as well as not being recovered. Next one, in D Dorian, you can see a high point. It's the octave of D above the tonic. The high point's interesting. It doesn't really have a very strong leap at all, but then it does something to where on the downbeat you can see a recovery of going down a step, but then on the upbeat in the middle of that it first goes down a third and then it goes back up. So actually I like the sound of that. I think it works pretty good, but that might just be me. It may not be the most proper thing to do in these exercises, but I think that's something that actually works out just fine. You can also see a pretty strong established low point here in the G. There's a big leap to it. And then on top of that, it's scale degree 4, so not a very good sense of resolution. And then on top of that, we have a strong leap to it, and then there's not a very strong recovery. Then in all, the entire counterpoint does not have very much stepwise motion at all. In fact, if you count it, you'll see 7 cases of stepwise motion and 13 cases of leaps. So it's about double the amount of leaps as stepwise motion. So it could definitely help to throw in some more stepwise motion in here. Okay, last, it's a counterpoint written below, so we do see an obvious low point, the note D here. It's also a consonant leap below the tonic, being a 10th below the tonic F. Also, there is a rather larger leap of a 5th to the low point, so that's good. And then after that larger leap going down, then it's recovered going up. There's also a sort of high point before the resolution. Of course, it's not really higher than anything else in the counterpoint, and it's not the highest point. But compared to what's going before it is creating a sort of high point. And also it's leaped up again, a rather large leap of a 5th, and then it's recovered, then again down. So in all, if we look at the whole thing, there's a lot of stepwise motion throughout it. There also is a good amount of leaps, but as you can see within that, there's stepwise motion and leaps right next to each other. There's not just a bunch of stepwise motion in the beginning and end, and then a bunch of leaps in the middle or something. There's a bunch of stepwise motion and leaps throughout the whole thing. And then there are larger leaps going to areas like the low point and the high point, which then are recovered. And in all, there's a lot of variation of intervals between note to note and also the upbeats or the downbeats. So upbeat to upbeat and downbeat to downbeat. There's a lot of variation of different intervals. You don't see a lot of 5th and 5th between every upbeat, and you also don't see a lot of 3rds and 6ths between every single downbeat. There's a good amount of variation throughout.